The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week, we're going to review Austin's 2-0 loss away in Seattle, and then preview the home match versus LAFC this weekend, but then have a lot of other news to talk about, including a new player signing, another player rumor, and then we also have the MLSPA salary drop and a few other pieces of Austin FC news. My name's Landon, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and I have a question for you, Landon.
What's that?
Do you actually dream? And do you dream big when you do? Or do you remember them?
I do dream. I rarely remember them.
Well, I have been having a lot of dreams I remember lately, and they are all very boring. Like dreams that I've reset a bunch of meetings, then I have to get up the next day and like check my schedule to see if those meetings have been reset. Or I had a dream the day before that we had packed the Patreon stuff, and so when I woke up the next morning, I was like, "That's done. Feel really good about that stuff getting out." And one that's a little bit relevant to this week is I had a dream that I had read that Olivier Giroud had left LAFC by mutual agreement, and I had to like go read the website to see if that was actually true or not. Like, it's just, I should have better dreams.
That one was true. The other ones, I'm not sure. What do you think that means, Jeremiah? Is there a direct line to something that's happening in your life here?
I don't know. I would like them to be better. Maybe I'm not creative enough every day, and so my dreams have like collapsed into my head, and I don't think as hard as I used to. But yeah, I would like better dreams, at least ones that I can tell apart from reality.
There is a listener question from last week that we wanted to return to, which was no, this wasn't a listener question. This was from the Apple Podcast panel that I was on, where I was asked who would play me in a movie, and I, of course, had a bad answer. But our listeners came through with some pretty good answers. I'll give mine first because I think they're pretty good. But there was I think a perfect answer for Jeremiah. So we'll start with mine, which were, I just had to look up his real name, but Nick Miller from New Girl, whose name is Jake Johnson, was one for me. I think he can get like the goofy side of me. Probably we don't look super alike, but it's not so far off. I think he could get the goofy side of me, but maybe not the nerdy side of me. And then one of the other suggestions was Oscar Isaac, which, to be clear, all of these people are far too handsome to play me. And Oscar Isaac could probably get the nerdy part, but could he get the goofy part? I'm not sure. So pretty good castings there for me. But Jeremiah's was perfect. Do you remember who said this one?
Gosh, I don't. And I even commented on it in the Slack that we read about it, but I don't remember who had the original idea. But yeah, I do appreciate it. And
it was Timothy Oliphant.
Yeah.
Which is, I said Walton Goggins on the last show, which is not bad, but Timothy Oliphant is perfect. Like even as he's gotten a little bit older, the amount of gray in his hair is about perfect for Jeremiah Bentley. His hairline is not as far back as Walton Goggins is, but I think that one's great. I heard a story on a podcast recently where I don't remember what podcast it was or why they were talking about these two people, but they were talking about Walton Goggins and Timothy Oliphant being in a movie together and how they didn't get along because Walton Goggins is the type of actor that like needs to live in his character a little bit and like really get into a headspace to deliver a performance. And Timothy Oliphant is the kind of guy who can turn it on when the camera starts rolling and then just be relaxed and hanging out while the camera's not on. And they really rubbed each other the wrong way for that reason. So I think that also maybe lends itself to a better Jeremiah Bentley performance as well.
Yeah, I think Timothy Oliphant and I probably have very similar personalities, and I might have shaved my beard earlier tonight before coming on the show with that picture of Timothy Oliphant up because I liked how it looked like in the photo. So like we've got basically the same beard right now, regardless of everything else.
Okay, it was Sonia, friend of the show, who was also at the Apple Podcast event and got to hear that question live. So Sonia, you nailed it. All right, let's get into the soccer.
Yeah, let's talk about the soccer of the week. So Saturday night, Austin FC lost. Tough performance against Seattle, 2-0, largely dominated by the Sounders. Now ninth in the West in a possible playoff spot depending upon how you define the playoffs. Luckily, still ahead of Houston and Dallas. You started by writing this note on sort of how to open it, so I'll ask you this: like, do we think the break hurt or helped?
Yeah, I mean, I think it hurt, and Nico Estevez kind of said as much in the post-game press conference. Last week, we were talking about this, whether or not the playing through the Club World Cup would help or hurt Seattle. I think we were being hopeful, saying that maybe they'll be tired, even though it really wasn't a crazy game load, and they played
Right.
on Monday, and then the game was on Saturday at home for them. But I think my other fear that I brought up is what actually came true, which was it was kind of a steel sharpening steel moment where, okay, they didn't win any of these games in the Club World Cup, but they could hold their heads high coming out of it. They came into this game really confident, really clean, playing really, really well against Austin. And Austin came out looking okay. Like they did fine for a lot of the game, but lost focus in some really key moments. And when you do that against a team that is as sharp as Seattle is in general, a lot of times, but especially on this night, they're going to punish you. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I think one thing that I didn't really appreciate about Seattle, and maybe it was because Jesus Ferreira hasn't had the best season and that he scores his goals. Like, that is a super deep team. And maybe, probably the deepest team in Major League Soccer, at this point. So, like, even if they had played a lot of minutes, they also have guys that they can rotate in to play. And then we also saw that. So
Danny Musovski is not their first choice striker, and he's
right. Yeah.
scored against us. Paul Rothrock is not their first choice winger at this point. He would be a nailed on starter for Austin right now. And they brought in Ryan Kent and Jordan Morris off the bench at the end of the game. I'm like, yeah, that's a sign of their depth right there.
Yeah. And another thing we talked about, I think last week at the press conference, maybe we didn't talk about it on the show, was the fact that the guys who had babies were going to get some extra time off. And so we see Mircea Uzuni apparently also picked up a hamstring injury, and then we see Osman Bukhari not start kind of because of that. So that also is a way that the time off hurt the club. And I think maybe you should also like kind of cover what Austin looks like without Osman Bukhari at this point.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the stats here, 8 of our 11 shots came after Osman Bukhari entered the match. And to be fair, that's not entirely representative. To be fair, Austin was down 2-0 at that point and pushing and throwing numbers forward. So not all of them came as a direct result of him being on the field, but he did make us look significantly more dangerous. And when you look at the other two wingers, John Gallagher and Javier Obrian, they're not clean enough or quick enough with the ball. They're both very fast runners, but you talk about quickness with the ball, the ability to receive cleanly, play quickly, and kind of create those triangles that we were talking about in the last league game. These guys are not great at that kind of thing. And so when it's just on one side and you have Bukhari on the other side, you can kind of get away with that. But when it's on both sides and you can't really reliably play through either of those sides, it's going to be an uphill climb anytime you're trying to use the ball to create chances in the final third. And that's what we saw in this game. And you talk about Seattle's depth. Bukhari's finally coming on. We've talked about Austin's relative depth to previous seasons. I think that is still true for those role player guys. But as far as like real difference makers, we really still only have a couple, and that's on a good night. And you see Seattle bringing these guys off the bench. Like the difference is clear and shows that this roster still has some way to go before we can be in the same conversation with some other teams in this league.
Yeah, absolutely. So we tease this. We got a smoke tweet at, I think, around noon today from Anthony Precourt. We talked about the depth of the roster. So we did this is a guy that you wrote into the notes. Like, we should talk about Nicky Beloko probably coming in, but we got confirmation a little bit after around 1:30 that Nicky Beloko will be an Austin FC player. So let's talk through his profile.
Yeah, there have been some signs, I think some reporting out of Switzerland. And then I think he was even maybe following the club or following some Austin FC accounts or something like that at one point. So it seemed like it was probably going to happen, but now it's official. Nicky Beloko is a 25-year-old Cameroonian Swiss player. So he was born in Cameroon, moved to Switzerland when he was 12 years old, I believe. Was a former Swiss youth international, played with them essentially until it would have been time for him to be on the full national team. Never quite made that step, but still a pretty good sign for him to be playing that far through the youth levels for a team that is a Swiss team that it has a lot of talent, pumps out a lot of talent, relatively speaking. So he broke into the Sion, is what I'm going to say, is the name of this team. Broke into their first team in the Swiss top flight as a teenager. I think he was 17, 18 when that happened. Made a move to Fiorentina in Italy. I think he made 1 or 2 appearances for their first team, mainly played with their reserves and went on loan a couple of times. But then in 2022, he returned to Switzerland playing for Lucerne and has been an everyday starter for them for the last 3 years. Lucerne is in the Swiss top flight. I think Switzerland is probably a slight step below MLS, but not super far. So if he's playing for a top half team in Switzerland and is an everyday starter, I think that's a good sign of kind of the level of quality that he's at least at MLS level. Like, I don't think he's below that at all.
Well, I think we can kind of get into later on sort of where he fits. But I think one of the interesting things that was in this press release that they talked about is that he actually signed in January of 2025. So pre-contract, which you're allowed to sign once you, I guess if you're less than 6 months out from the end of your contract, that's when you can do it.
Yeah, that's right. I guess you don't hear that reported a lot. So I think it was interesting that they included that in the release, but also impressive that they were able to just keep it quiet for that long. Cause
right.
I think it was a couple of months ago when those first Twitter reports started coming out. And so there's several months in between those two moments where nobody knew about it or nobody was reporting on it anyway. So that was interesting, but that does mean it is a free transfer. And so no transfer fee here, which is great.
Yeah. And one of the things, this comes up sometimes when Austin signs players from somewhere else. And I'm glad they were clear about this. So although I don't think he will be eligible to play until July 24th, when the transfer window officially opens, he will be allowed to begin training with the team on July 1st when his contract ends with the other club, which I think is the same situation Mikkel Dessler was in last year. But I remember a lot of questions about, like, when can he actually train? Could he train before now that he's in town? Or, like, how does it look and when can he play? And so we got pretty clear parameters around where this looks for Nicky Beloko and other international transfers when they're out of contract.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think I saw some discussion online earlier about like how long would it take for him to actually start playing, and some Austin fans saying like, okay, well, we signed him, but he's not going to play until the last game of the season. This is different because he is in town already. We started seeing social media posts of him and his agent with a realtor and at the Austin FC training ground. And so he is here. And so he will probably not be full on 100% training tomorrow, but I expect him to be at the training ground at the very least, maybe doing some orientation, welcome to Austin kind of stuff, if not actually being on the field. But he'll be on the field this week, which is great news, meaning he's going to have 3-4 weeks to train with the team, try to get as close to match fitness as he can, and be ready to go for that first game, which I think is like on the July 30th, something like that would be the first game he'd be eligible to play in. I'm not expecting him to be match fit and to start in that game because playing games is really the only way you can get there, but he will have been training with the team for several weeks. And if they feel like he's up to speed and ready to go and come off the bench in that game, he'll be able to.
Well, I love the idea of him showing up tomorrow and like having to learn his email password and like where the emergency exits are out of the office, like the rest of us do. But I think go ahead and get it into him as a player, because I think we touched on this when the first rumors came about, but you've had more of a chance to study him since then.
Yeah, and it's been a while too, right? And there's been several other rumors since then, so it's worth a refresher anyway. I think he could best be described as a box-to-box midfielder. He's been deployed in various ways as far as his nominal position goes, but that is the way he plays is he'll get forward, push lines that way, but also will track back and defend as well. Lucerne, from the film I watched from this season, at the very least, was playing in something like a 4-3-1-2, and he was often on the left side of that midfield line of three and shuttling box to box, and so not playing as a true defensive mid, but also not the 10 being relied upon to be the real chance creator in the team. He is an outstanding athlete. Like, if you take like Owen's dynamism and athleticism, but make it 6 feet tall, that's kind of what you're looking at here. And then he's a really strong ball winner, so can put in tackles, take balls off of people, covers ground really well, can close down space really well. And so good defensive presence. Probably not really a lone 6 where he's sitting behind 2 further forward midfielders distributing on his own, but I could see him fitting really well alongside someone like Danny Pereira, or maybe someone like Besart Sabovic, where the other player is the one responsible for doing more of the ball progression with dribbling and passing, and then he can do a bit more of that dirty work in the running, while also still like kind of doing the job that Owen does sometimes, where when he receives between lines, is he going to be the guy to turn and hit that deadly pass? Probably not, but he can turn and push past a defender and just use his speed and dynamism to open up space that way. So I think those are his real strengths. He can play a little bit more advanced, but again, I don't think you would want to rely on him for chance creation.
Well, one of the others, I don't remember who raised this concern, but one concern was like, without Alexander Ring or any other French speakers on the squad, like being from Cameroon, speaking French, like would he be an outlier? And I think you kind of looked at his past, and it seems, especially with Switzerland, like there's a lot of English going on there, so it's probably not something that people need to worry about. And look, in soccer, got like 10 languages on the field, and the guys always manage to find a way to communicate in the terms of the sport anyhow. So maybe that concern is a little overrated. Like, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly going to be an obstacle for him because we don't have any native French speakers on the first team. And so, yeah, he grew up in a French-speaking part of Cameroon, mostly lived in a French-speaking part of Switzerland, but I'm guessing he has some English just from, like you said, like English is very widely spoken in Switzerland. It's taught in the schools there, which he was in school there by the time he was 12. And then he's played on teams in other countries, and then I was looking up his managers throughout those years, and he had several international managers that were not from Switzerland and definitely didn't speak French as their first language. Maybe that's what they coached in, but I'm guessing at least a couple of his managers did not coach in French. And you see that in a lot of teams where there's guys from all over the world. And so in Europe, you'll see, okay, maybe we're in X country, but we have guys from all over the place. I'm going to coach in English just because that's going to be what most people speak. And so, yeah, I also saw on Instagram that he got married a couple of weeks ago. There's some photos of him and his new wife in Cameroon. So it seems like she'll be able to come here with him probably, and he'll have that support system as well. So it's not an 18-year-old kid coming here alone, never left his home country before. This guy's he's only 25, not super old, but he's been around, pretty experienced for as young as he is, and he'll have his partner here with him as a little bit of a support system. So it's going to be an obstacle, of course, but it seems like there's some signs here that it's not going to be the first time he's faced this obstacle.
Yeah, so what I get now is like he's another talented midfielder that doesn't exactly seem to fit the biggest needs of the club, which we seem to have a lot of on the roster at this point in time. And so I think later on in the show, we can talk about where he fits in, if it's a formation change, who's subject to losing minutes, given that he's here, like, and sort of all the downstream implications of adding a guy who, like you said, is definitely an upgrade in terms of overall talent to this roster, but it, again, becomes like a question of fit.
Yeah, exactly. One last thing in this top segment is there's a Matt Doyle tweet that you pasted in here. And it was a response to, this is a Blue Sky post, a response to a post to one of his posts where the initial post was Matt Doyle said, Charlotte looked like a team that's quiet quitting. Somebody then responds to that, you should watch Austin. And Matt Doyle responds, Austin don't look like they're quitting. They just look like a team that spent $35 million on attacking players and somehow managed not to buy even one guy who can complete an effing pass. That's damning, but fairly apt, don't you think?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times we've talked on the show multiple times about Doyle being very sure of his opinion and not seeming that informed. But whether this is just like a broken clock being right twice a day situation or not, it seems really apt in terms of describing Austin. And I wanted to like argue like Brandon Vasquez could be on the complete a pass, but I was like, oh, he can be on the receiving end of pass, but he can't actually make a pass either. So
yeah,
it was harsh, but it's hard to disagree with ultimately with the greater point.
Yeah, and he could have, like, the lazy thing to do would be like, yeah, Austin does suck. They are quitting, but it's not true. They are working really hard. I don't think you could accuse this team of not trying. They are still working very hard, but he's absolutely right that like there's just a gaping hole talent wise as far as like what this roster needs. Still don't have it, and this most recent move still doesn't fix it. So yeah, hate to agree with Doyle, but he nailed it.
Okay, well let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll talk about the Seattle match, preview LA, and like we said, there's like a lot of other news and insights to cover too. So it should be an interesting rest of the show.
All right, hang tight. We'll be right back.
No one is around.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
You can go to FVF.law to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FVF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
Amplify has been the home of fee-free banking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees and minimum balances. That means Amplify's fee-free checking accounts can help you get more mileage from your everyday spending. And my friend, Chief Experience Officer at Amplify, Stacey Armijo, also has a new podcast called Changing Austin, where she interviews local influencers, politicians, change makers, and all those kinds of things. So check out their podcast too, in addition to FVF Laws when you get done listening to soccer podcasts.
Yeah, listen to this one first, though. Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Amplify Esperanza branch on game day, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower-soccer. And Moon Tower Soccer is proud to be brought to you by St. Blaine's Hot Sauce. St. Blaine's is the producer of the Moon Tower Marita and Garlic that some of our Patreon folks have received. And the reviews have been very positive, right, Jeremiah?
They absolutely have been. I saw maybe half a dozen in Los Verdes Slack, which has a channel dedicated to the show. Everybody loved it. People put it on their eggs, their burritos, their nachos. They eat it alone. They're all looking for a way to find more. Like, I want to say we knocked it out of the park with this, but we had actually nothing to do with it other than like telling Blaine it was okay. So great job, Blaine.
Yeah, Blaine did a great job making the sauce. Becca did a great job designing the labels. We just kind of sat here. So thanks to everyone who made this happen. If you have already eaten up all of your Moon Tower Marita and Garlic and want some more St. Blaine's hot sauce, you can go to stblaineshotsauce.com, and that's BLANE, stblaineshotsauce.com. You can order several varieties of their goods online. You can also find them most Saturdays in Sunset Valley at the SFC Farmers Market there. second Saturday market days in Georgetown, the Pullman grocery store in San Antonio. And then you can also buy them on their website. But lots of good products. They gave me a little sampler box. One of my highlights was the Thai chili and mustard. I'm a big mustard guy. I don't know if you are, Jeremiah. I like mustard, and this has some nice chili spice in it as well. So I'm a big fan of that one. But all the ones that they gave us to try are really, really good. So check them out at stblaineshotsauce.com or go to that website, and you can also find their farmers market appearances, and then check out their social media, and they'll kind of post updates there as well. All right, we are back. Let's talk about this loss away in Seattle. Jeremiah, we kind of talked a little bit about what we hoped might be true about this game leading up to it. Is there any other pregame narratives we need to get into?
I think we can probably save a lot of them, like just sort of for the lineup formation discussion. And we touched on it like at the front about how the guys that got a little bit longer break, will they come back healthy or not? The entry list did look good. Kind of talked about Seattle being super deep, even though they didn't go very far in the Club World Cup. So I think there was probably some hope that we had that was misplaced, given the fact that we didn't have to, didn't really know a week ago exactly what it was going to look like with the time off for Austin. But like, let's just get into like the game itself. And I think let's start with the lineup. So it's changed from the last match 2 weeks ago, only at one spot. So we get Stuver, Biederu, Heinzike, Svatak, and Dessler, Gallagher, Savovic, Pereira, and then we get Obrian on the wing instead of Bukhari. And I think we talked about that, but it's because he was out a little bit longer being home with his new baby. Then we got Wolf and Vasquez like ostensibly up top, but if you look at the way Austin lined up 2 weeks ago and the way they lined up last night, like it feels like it looked a little bit different.
I'm still calling this a 4-2-3-1. Owen was playing as a midfielder.
Okay.
But yeah, looking at this lineup, we saw Uzuni was listed as questionable. And then when the lineup came out, he was not in the squad for the match day. I was maybe hoping this could be a blessing in disguise where, again, you don't have to bench Uzuni because he's not available. And so there's no drama being started. He's not there. So maybe let's see Robert Taylor play on the left wing and see what happens. It's not what we got. And I was ready to be upset. And you know me, Jeremiah. I'm always like, let's wait and see what the coach says after. Maybe there's a good reason. I was ready to be upset that Taylor was not starting in this game. Nico comes out after the game and he says, yeah, Bukhari was traveling for longer, didn't get enough training in. We were worried about playing him too long. Robert Taylor still building up from that injury he sustained in the Open Cup. And so we weren't ready to play him longer than 60 minutes or so. So we didn't want to start him. Fine. Fair enough. I still really want to see Robert Taylor get a start, but he also talked about the importance of having everyone healthy as we get into Open Cup play again in kind of a busy July. So I still maybe don't like it entirely, but I understand.
Well, and I think we'll get into this later, but that a highlight of this upcoming week is it is definitely important to manage everybody's minutes coming out of the break, going into the game this weekend, and then like knowing what's ahead, because it is going to be super busy pretty soon. So
one other thing,
man, I just feel like,
sorry, finish your thought. Sorry.
Oh, what I want to say is like, I feel like Robert Taylor's just kind of been snake bit. Like we haven't really seen him get a full run since he signed, because he hadn't played a lot and there was an injury and then there's like time off. And like, I am ready to see what he can do given a full 90.
Yeah. Nico seems to still not think he's ready for a full 90, which is frustrating for how long he's been here and how long ago that injury was. But also you don't want to rush guys back from injury and then have them out for the rest of the season. So yeah, I get it. One other interesting thing that we learned in the post-game press conference is, I think it was Moises from Verde All Day asked about Stuver being the captain again in this game. And we've talked about, like, okay, with these new rules, it's difficult to have the keeper as captain because they can't go out and talk to the ref. And Nico said, like, actually, if your keeper is the captain, you can designate one outfield player to be the one to talk to the ref. And it was Brendan Hines-Ike, which, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you can still, if you want the symbolism of that person who happens to be your goalkeeper to be the captain, but the logistics of having an outfield player do it, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's the best of both worlds, which I guess we probably should have thought about. That was going to have to be the way you were going to do it with these new rules if they were actually going to enforce them.
So getting into the game, Austin start off in kind of bend but don't break mode and looking okay doing that. Seattle's keeping the ball, moving the ball, but Austin's doing fairly well to keep it predictable and get out of their half whenever they did win the ball back. The first really nervy moment comes in the 11th minute. Austin is playing a really compact kind of mid-block defense. So the back line is quite high, but the front line is not pressing super high. So they're pretty tight together, trying to keep them through the middle, which that strategy is good for that kind of thing. But the risky part is giving up balls over the top when you're playing that line so high. And it's risky, especially against a team that has speed on that front line like Seattle does. So when you're doing this, you have to keep a good offside line and stay together. I think on this ball over the top to Musovski, he may have been offside, but if he wasn't, it was because Biru didn't stay in line with his center backs, who Svatak and Hines-Ike were gesturing like, here's the line, step with me. And Biru didn't really do that. And that ball over the top to Musovski, again, it didn't lead to anything, so we didn't get a good replay. But if he was onside, it was because Biru wasn't paying attention, which is frustrating. So there's a ball that goes over the top to Musovski. Svatak is able to recover and kind of face him up, but Musovski's still able to create a good shot for himself. His shot almost 5 holes Stuver, but deflects off of his ankle and onto the post, which keeps it out of the net, but then it bounces it into the middle of the 6-yard box. It falls to Biru. He tries to clear it out of danger, but rocks it off the post, and it surprises Dessler by hitting him in the chest. He turns and clears it upfield, and it ends up not leading anything. But what was Biru doing here?
I feel like he really lost his head. This is almost the Amro Tarek 2025 performance, right? And I think when we look at this, would have been maybe one of the 3 most embarrassing goals in Austin FC history, possibly, if it had gone in. So, like, thank God for that post. But yeah, I don't know what he's thinking. I think that just generally, like, the poor guy had a really bad night. I was just looking back. It's only 2 weeks ago that he was like MLS Team of the Week, and we know that was just for being a defender who scored a goal. But I don't think you could find like a bigger dichotomy across 2 matches than the game he had 2 weeks ago, and just like, because he'll come up again later on, and at least one of the goals from where he just kind of wasn't paying attention. So it's just really off night for Biru.
Yeah, the way he strikes this ball, it makes it look like he was almost trying to hit the post in order to keep it from going out for a corner. I'm almost positive. Well, I don't know.
Bad strategy.
He's an unpredictable man, so maybe that is what he was trying to do. But surely it's not what he was trying to do. But it kind of looked that way. Luckily, it didn't lead to anything, but it very well could have. So the first goal in this one comes in right at the end of the first half. One of the things we learned leading up to this game was that there would be grass on the field at Lumen Field, which is normally an artificial turf pitch. They had to put grass in to be one of the host sites for the Club World Cup, and they decided just to leave it for this game, and then they'll pull it up and reinstall, or I guess re-uncover the turf. I don't know if they actually took it up or just covered it. But anyway, there's grass on the field for this one, which in theory you think would be a good thing for a team like Austin who plays on grass. But in the build up to this play, there's a deep free kick from Stuver. It was falling in the area of Brandon Vasquez, who only has their very small fullback, Kosa Rienzi, on his back. You'd bet on Brandon Vasquez to win that ball and bring it down. maybe he creates a chance, but at the very least, he brings it down, completes a pass, and sees out the rest of the half because it was past the 1 minute of added time at this point. But what happens instead? Brandon Vasquez slips, which was the third time that I saw him slip on camera. Who knows how many times it happens when he wasn't in frame. But this grass, whenever they put it on top of turf, it's rarely good. It's rarely nice to play on. The US played on a similar situation on Sunday, and the ball was bouncing really strangely on it. The players said that it was soft and they were like sinking into it. And so it is not the perfectly manicured Q2 pitch that they are used to. And so where this could have been a very easy routine play to see out the half, instead it turns into a goal for Seattle. So Vasquez slips, Seattle wins the ball. From that point, Owen gets beat with a pass. Danny goes in for a challenge, loses it. Seattle retains the ball. Savovich goes in for a challenge, loses it. Seattle retains the ball. Your midfielders are so important in transition defense, and all three of our midfielders get eliminated in the span of about 3 seconds here.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's like watching Barry Sanders run, except for if Barry Sanders was very average and the defense was just falling down all around him, and a little bit like when Barry Sanders carried the ball for the Detroit Lions. At least he was like making the mistakes happen. But that was a really disappointing performance from them.
Yeah. So Rothrock gets played up the left side. Our back line is scrambling again with no support on the other side of them. And they have 4 Seattle players running at the goal. Rothrock does really well to keep Dessler on skates here and kind of keep him just unable to really put in a challenge. He was doing as much as he could, just kind of contain. And he's able to get a cross away from inside the 18, finds Jesus Ferreira alone at the back post to volley it into essentially a wide open net because Stuver was still at the near post, ready to deal with whatever came there. You mentioned this Biru mistake. I think Nico tried to defend him a little bit here in the post-game press conference. And I do think this error is not as egregious as some have made it out to be. He does well to get on his horse, get back into position. He starts to cheat inside to help with what he thinks is going to be a cutback pass to the penalty spot. But as soon as Rothrock makes that last move towards the end line, he needs to read that moment. And because he saw Ferreira, I see him check his shoulder. He knows Ferreira's there. And so whenever Rothrock makes that move, he needs to know that and get closer to goal and cut out a pass if he can get there. But he falls asleep for just half a second. And instead of going to the half tide, we're down 1-0. And this is what we talked about last week. Is like a team that is as competent as Seattle all the way across the board. You can't make mistakes. And this was half a second that he fell asleep. There's tons of mistakes that happened before, right? That led to this moment. But in that very moment, he turned off for just an instant and it killed us.
Well, one of the things that we can't not get away from either is that Jesus Ferreira scores this goal. Like
it had to be him, didn't it?
Yeah, habitual Austin FC like pest. And I think I had 3 different text groups with Austin FC fans and some like kind of casual fans that are all like blankety blanking Ferreira with a like insert a different word
same
in
for
front
me.
of that. Yeah. Just like the moment it happened, like my phone blew up and I kind of knew what the topic was going to be from everybody.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys. We'll actually get into one of these players that like guys I like to hate on the field, but in reality, I think are probably good dudes that I would probably like if they were on my team. Jesus Ferreira doesn't fall into that category. I don't like him. So that's halftime. Not an ideal ending. Austin comes out. They're showing a bit more fight, but then go down for a second goal in the 54th minute. So Brandon Vasquez almost wins a challenge while pressing high up the field. Christian Roldan, who was really good in this game, no surprise. I mean, they played him out on the wing for the last several years because they had some really high quality central midfielders and they'd move him out there kind of out of necessity. They have some really quality wingers now. And so he's been playing central midfield and he's been great. He's been really, really good. And this game was no exception. He's able to keep it, drops the ball deep. Austin pushes up to try to pin them in deep, but instead Seattle plays a series of really tidy passes up the right-hand side of the field and have Austin's defense chasing shadows, essentially. They play Ferreira into space in the midfield. And Svatak is on Musovski kind of alone in space. He knows Musovski's faster than him, so he turns and just starts running. He's like, no offside trap here. I'm just going to run. And so not a bad idea, but it leaves space behind him for Ferreira to just play to Musovski's feet. And he's running at goal 1v1 with Svatak just sprinting in open field. He's able to turn him at one point, like right around the edge of the 18-yard box, puts Svatak in an awkward spot. He does well to turn and recover and keep decent positioning, but stays just far enough away from Musovski that he's able to get a shot off. Really nice finish here, to be fair. But I think what Svatak is trying to do is sometimes you have a guy running the box. You try to give them that near post and just trust that your keeper can save it if they take that shot. So I think that's what Svatak's trying to do, but he gives him a little bit too much space. And instead, the shot goes between Svatak's legs to the far post and catches Stuver wrong-footed, because I think he was kind of on the same page as Svatak. Is like, okay, we're going near post. I'm going to take this away. And when it goes that direction, he just can't do anything about it. So right after Svatak gets turned, he did most of it well, but instead of giving him that space, I think he needs to start closing and get closer to Musovski there and force him to take that near post shot instead of giving him the option to actually pick his spot there. And again, it's another example where we are a solid defensive team when we are defending as a team. But as soon as there's a breakdown, we don't have any defensive superheroes that can regularly put out fires like that on their own. We have to do it as a team. And when we get isolated like that, we don't have any standouts that can take care of those moments by themselves.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the big themes that comes across both these goals and across the season. And then just for this game and both these goals, like the talent gap is just something that is undeniable. And with a talent gap like this, you have to be perfect. And Austin doesn't really seem to be capable of being perfect on a lot of nights, because these individual breakdowns are going to happen. But yeah, Seattle's really good. And I know we've talked about that a couple times already, but I don't think it can be stated enough that's just like a fundamental difference between these two clubs. And it shows up in moments like this and on the first goal. Yeah.
You give that space to Kansas City or whatever. Like, yeah, maybe they don't punish you. This team's going to punish you. So right after that goal, Bukhari gets subbed on. Austin start showing some signs of life, but still can't really break down Seattle's defense. Taylor and Rubio come on a little bit after that. They take off Sabovic and Dessler. So Taylor goes to left wing. Gallagher drops to right back. Owen drops into central midfield alongside Danny, and Rubio takes over the 10 spot. Not a lot to speak of from that point on. Reed Baker-Whiting gets his second yellow in the 90th and gets sent off. Too late to make a difference. I think John Gallagher gets a shot inside the 18 in the 91st minute, but skies it over the bar. Apart from that, only a few half chances for both sides in the last 30 minutes, but nothing that ever made you think the result was going to change, and it didn't. 2-0.
Yeah, I think Austin ends the night with one shot on target. The one thing I would say about the subs is I know that people will be critical of this coach and the coach before, sort of about waiting a long time to make subs and, not trying to change the game. Like, I appreciate making offensive subs to try to chase the game. And it didn't work out on this night, but it feels like Nico was like willing to make a change and sort of approach in order to try to make something out of it. And, we didn't get a ton out of it, but it was good to see that kind of move.
I was really hoping to get both winger subs at halftime. If you go in tied, then you say, okay, maybe we run these guys for a bit longer and then put on some offensive subs. But when you give up that late goal in the first half, don't push the guys more than you think they can go. But surely Bukhari could go 45, right?
Yeah.
Like those two, Gallagher and Obrian, didn't give me any reason to think that they were going to change the game. And so, yeah, he did put him on at 54. I don't know if that was in reaction to the goal or if that was kind of the plan all along, but it came after the second goal and the deficit was just too much at that point.
I think we talked about the players I wanted to talk about. I'm interested in sort of the post game. I guess the one thing in the post game press conference that sat wrong with me, that also sat wrong with a lot of people, was this idea from Nico that Austin had a solid chance to get to 2-1 and then a chance to tie the game. Like, I don't know where he thinks those chances were coming from.
Yeah, I don't. I went into this second watch with those comments in mind. I was like, maybe I missed some stuff. It was a late game. I was sleepy. Maybe I did miss something. But watching again, there were some chances, and I think even one of the stat models had Austin FC with higher XG. That may be true based on those models, but as far as quality chances and real moments to score goals, Seattle was in control of this game and had far more quality chances than Austin did. I did not ever feel like this result was going to be any different than what it was.
Yeah, I feel like that a lot of that XG and even like the stats as far as possession and shots and things like that, the balance comes after Austin is down 2-0. I think in possession, like Seattle had 65% in the first half. After they go up 2-0, it's like 50-50. So even like if you look at those statistical models, I feel like a lot of it came after sort of the moment was lost for Austin.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other notes on the game, or are we ready to take a break?
Now let's take a break and move on to hopefully brighter days ahead.
Yeah, and probably a more exciting and fun segment of the show as well.
Yeah. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The Sage Wilson team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused and have over 30 years of combined real estate experience. Our friends at Sage Wilson Realty are giving away 2 tickets to an upcoming match. You can fill out the form in the show notes for your chance to win.
If you or someone you know are in need of Sage Real Estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com.
Our premier sponsor is McGuire Woods Consulting, helping clients in the public affairs space, from lobbying at the local, statewide, and federal levels to digital and communication campaigns across the country.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities, but only supports this podcast because Austin FC is going to make a late season comeback. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to win MLS Cup. They're going to win the US Open Cup. They're going to win Copa Tejas. You heard it here first, folks. Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information. All right, we are back. We are going to preview the LAFC match. We're going to talk about the recent MLS Players Association salary drop. But first, let's talk about some player rumors and then what this roster, I guess what changes we may or may not see to this roster throughout the rest of the summer transfer window. Let's start with this player rumor, which is Nico Figal, 31-year-old Argentinian center back, currently playing at Boca in Argentina, but played 2 seasons for Inter Miami in MLS. Jeremiah, what do you think about this one?
We know that this is a position of need. I think when we were identifying where Austin would maybe sign players in the summer, we felt like one of these slots and maybe one of the senior slots and one of the international slots would go to a center back. So from that term, he hits the profile. What I love is this next line in the outline, why Landon doesn't love it.
I think quality-wise, I mean, I haven't watched him for Boca. I don't know what his form has been like for the last few years, but those 2 years at Miami, he was a bright spot on, like, one of the bright spots on a bad Miami team. So he was a good MLS player.
Really bad, yeah.
But he's currently under contract through 2027. Like I said, he's 31 years old. So it would be paying a transfer fee for a guy who you're probably not going to be able to move on. And he was a TAM player for Miami, so he'd probably not be a cheap player. I think he's a good center back. Like if he can be as good as he was for Miami, I think he would slot in and be a starter for us probably. But I don't like the idea of paying a transfer fee for a 31-year-old center back when you can. It's been shown you can get quality center backs for less than that.
Yeah, and Austin has really struck out on big signings. So like there have to be some transformational players. Like there have to be some difference makers that come in for this team to really elevate itself. And this guy does not feel like a difference maker.
I don't know. Maybe he would be, but I don't know. I'm not super excited about it if it happens. Happy to be proven wrong, but I'll have to see it first.
All right. Well, I touched on this. So Austin right now has one senior international slot remaining, one senior slot remaining, which means that the only other moves that Austin can make are dependent upon a senior player moving at the summer. Note you had it as Owen Wolf doesn't count because he's still on a supplemental deal. So, like, that's not an option. Do you see something like this happening, or do you think Austin's going to add one player and be content with where it is?
Yeah. It's one thing we didn't bring up when talking about Nicky Beloko earlier is that I think we had some hope that, okay, we got this guy on a free. The Swiss league salaries are probably not super high, so maybe we could get this guy in a supplemental deal. It got confirmed in that press release that he is a senior player, and then he, of course, takes up an international roster spot, which we assumed he would. So yeah, it leaves us with just that one. I think the rest of this window will kind of show. I guess it'll answer the question of is all of this still just a slow build for the future? Or could Austin make some moves and actually move some guys out? Like our top prospect right now is Owen, and you could get a lot of good money for it, but it doesn't open up a senior roster spot. It doesn't open up an international roster spot. If we were to make a move for a senior spot, like who would it be? Danny Pereira, I think you could probably get a good exchange in a trade for him within MLS. I don't know if you're going to get a huge transfer fee abroad for him right now, but I also don't know, like he's a fairly cheap quality MLS player. I don't know that you should necessarily just be trying to get rid of him. Is there anybody else on this roster you think could be moved out and open up one of those spots that we need?
I don't think anybody has the market appeal to do that. And we can talk about this when we talk about the salary stuff. There is still a buyout available, but Austin doesn't have any contracts that are so terrible. I don't think that you would buy somebody out without also creating a gap, right? Like you could buy Julio out, but you're going to have to find another center back. So that doesn't really create any roster upside.
Yeah. I mean, the buyout, Julio could be a target there. If we're bringing in someone like Figal or Mikael Nade, which is one of the other rumors, then you still even it out with the three center backs. Ilie, you could see him maybe being bought out, but again, these guys are at the end of their contract, and so I think it's more likely to just pump the brakes, let those contracts expire, and then try to fill those gaps in the winter transfer window, which is, I know, not what Austin FC fans want to hear because it doesn't solve our immediate problems, but it's probably the prudent thing to do. And responsible things to do are not always the most fun things to do.
Yeah, but I think one of the other reasons is one of the more responsible things to do is because of this whole where in the season are the window, in the season the window is, because the season's 2/3 the way or more over by the time the window opens, and anybody you sign is going to take some time to get up to speed. So you don't really help yourself that much unless you think you're one international superstar away from being a cup contender, which this club is not. And other teams that have done that, and we'll talk about the Olivier Giroud buyout here in a little bit, haven't necessarily paid off either.
Yeah. So let's say Austin is Roto's doing the slow play. We have the one senior roster spot, the one international roster spot, and that's all we're going to have for the rest of the season. Of the remaining player rumors that we've heard about, which one would you most want to happen in the roster's current state? So we'll say Tuti Andrade, who is the U22 Venezuelan attacking midfielder. Mikael Nade, who is the youngish center back. I already forgot all the details of where he plays and where he's from, but big, good defensive center back, still youngish. Or Nico Figal, probably a little over expensive for what he is, but proven MLS talent and a veteran player. Which of those guys would you rather bring in right now?
Okay, this is not relevant to that question, but I just watched The Price is Right for the first time in a long time. And I feel like this is the kind of situation that these contestants on The Price is Right often put themselves in. So, the closest to the actual price without going over.
$1.
What Austin could
Bob.
do is, yeah. Oh, and it was one where somebody bid 450 and then somebody bid 451 and then 452 and then 453 and the 453 person won it because it was like $700, which is the most annoying part of that game. All that to say, got to be attacking midfielder. It's got to be Andrade. I mean, among the people, if given the choices, only limited to the choices of the people we've been linked to, knowing the needs of this team, knowing the profile, like he's got to be the guy.
Yeah, that's probably like the highest upside opportunity. Still a very young player. Not many U22s have come into teams and been the main difference maker in a team. So I think it would be foolish for us to expect him to come in and do that. But anything's better than what we have right now as far as like that attacking instincts that this kid has. So I think the boring, more responsible play would maybe be Nade, which like you're still taking a chance on a young guy who could be here for a while, maybe turn into something really promising. Again, doesn't really fix our attacking problems this year, but Andrade might not either. And so I think that would be the argument for going after one of the other two.
Okay, given who we know with Beloko in now, I think we can exclude Dubrsarski here. So we've still got Danny, Owen, Sabovic, Ilie, Beloko competing for a limited number of midfield spots. Whose minutes do you think he takes away? And like you touched on this a little bit in the opening when we talked about him, but like whose skill set does he best match up with to maybe make the combination the best pairing?
That's a good question. And I think that is, again, one of the frustrating things about this signing is that it's not instant gratification where like in a vacuum, I think he's a good player. Where does he fit and does he solve problems we have? I don't think so. I think he probably would be in one of those double pivot spots, but and would probably need someone next to him to kind of be a partnership in that way. So I think you can't really take Owen's minutes away right now. I think he's too good to be rotated unless he needs it. So I think it would probably be a combination of like Danny and Sabovic. I would guess Sabovic would be like the most at risk right now to lose minutes to him. And then that bumps everyone else one down the list, right? So Ilie is then getting fewer minutes. Dubrsarski is getting even fewer minutes and so on and so forth. So, but I think immediately, like in the 11, Sabovic would probably be the one who might lose his spot to him if he comes in and looks like the real deal.
And so profile-wise, what I'm hearing from that is like basically you've got three guys who play best as a double pivot. Ilie is probably best as a defensive mid, but the worst overall right now as a player out of it. So you don't have anybody really optimized when you end up with the situation that Austin has in the midfield.
Yeah, and there's give and take to it all for sure, but I think that's why the double pivot probably still makes sense, where you can make up for those deficiencies in the aggregate by having two guys near each other. And then when you have a guy who can cover ground like Beloko does, that can kind of, okay, yeah, he's not sitting deep and playing as a true number 6, but he can cover enough ground that he can still do the defensive duties of that type of player while still being able to get forward and contributing in that way as well.
Well, I think the next player news that we got was today. So Nico Van Rijn, sort of fringe, not even fringe, Austin FC2 player who's gotten a couple call-ups to the first team, announced there was a mutual termination with Austin FC2. I'm assuming this is because he found a better opportunity somewhere else, and he and the club both decided it was time to move on. I think he's been with the team. Has he been with them all 3 years? Like basically since the existence of Austin FC2? If not all three, then at least two.
He didn't play the good year.
Okay. So he's just been the last 2 years?
Yeah. In the press release, they said like they wanted to do right by the player. He wanted to go back to Spain. I don't think this is a huge loss. The guy's, is he 24 years old?
Yeah.
If you're 24 and need an international roster slot and aren't good enough to demand one, like there's probably not space for you on an MLS roster. So it's a loss to the second team because I think he's one of our better defenders on that team, but that team is there to produce first team players. I don't think he's going to be one of those. And so if he realizes that and wants to go back home, like power to him, and good on the club for allowing him to do that.
Yeah, and that last point you made is the one I think is interesting. So the second team does exist to produce first team players. I think it can argue that they have not done that at all yet. If you look at the most productive players out of there, you've got Torres and Burton out of the academy. CJ Fodre, who was a super draft pick, and I believe is on a first team contract. Should we have expected more out of the second team at this point now?
It's still early. I have heard whispers out of the just folks in the Austin soccer community that there's been some cuts and maybe not spending as much money on the academy as some people think they should. And then you hear Nico and Roto saying like, oh, there's been some changes to the academy where we can like improve the quality. So I don't know who you believe there. And so we'll find out in a few years, like if this academy is actually producing anybody. I still think it's quite early to say it's a failure. Micah Burton, I've said this many times in the show. He's, 18, 19 years old. He is the first player to have started like on that youngest class that we've pushed all the way through. And so if you're saying that this academy isn't producing enough players, you're saying in our first class, we should be having players being on the first team already. That feels harsh to me. And so I don't think there's much evidence to say like, yeah, the academy's doing great and it's just going to come through soon. I don't think you can say that either, but I also don't think you can say it's a failure yet.
Let's move on from that to something that you got to attend last week. I do love knowing that you're out at more of these media availabilities. So we got the official announcement of the MLS All-Star team. The first two coach selections, one of these is not a surprise at all, were that Brad Stuver, and Brendan Vasquez. Knew I was going to screw that up. Were the two Austin FC picks for this roster. I think Stuver, we kind of all knew all along, was the safest possible pick. And Vasquez seemed pretty likely to be the other one if Austin was going to get two, which we all kind of knew that they were going to do. Do you have any highlights from the event itself that you want to share? They seem very excited.
Yeah, they were excited, but also, I mean, being there, standing with them, I feel like they were both humble about it as well, knowing that they were there because the coach picked them to be there. Yeah. While also feeling like, hey, I belong in this group. Like, I'm not going to be an outlier here. So that seems like how they approached it. I asked Nico about like the process of picking the team and like, did he actually have free reign over it? Did the league talk to him? And he gave a way more detailed answer than I was looking for. But he like actually seemed to take it very seriously as far as like putting together a good soccer team, which doesn't seem to always be the way it's done. And so he's like, yeah, we needed X, like everyone's going to play 15 or 30 minutes. And so we need X number of players at each position. And so that's kind of the way I approached it. And then talked about Brad being a guy who was being rewarded for his whole body of work throughout the last several years, which we've been calling this the Brad Stuver Lifetime Achievement Award, right? Which definitely deserves it. I think there's maybe keepers who in a given year have maybe stood out a bit more than him who didn't make these teams, but a guy who's been so consistent over the last 5 years and so good for the last 5 years and hasn't made that team yet, like very well deserved there. Brandon Vasquez seems to be probably a bit more of a marketing play. Played in Mexico, so the people tuning in to watch the Liga MX team will recognize him. And then there's just a bit more of a storyline with him probably playing against some of his former teammates and other guys that he played against there. So it's, if you opened it up to strictly a fan vote, there's also going to be guys who don't deserve to be there. Totally. And then if you open it up to coaches' picks, And then I'm guessing the league probably encouraged him to put some Austin players on it. I don't think this is fully his idea or any coach who's been the host team. I bet the league tells them like it's going to be mostly your home crowd. Put some of your players on this team. And so I think there's been less deserving players on all-star teams than Brandon Vasquez is this year.
Well, one other all-star thing before we move on. That jersey was boring as hell, right? Do we agree with
Yes. Yeah, there are some fun, like some interesting details within it that don't, like some texture details that don't show up in the photos very well. That being said, it's still pretty boring. Oh, one more thing on Stuver and Vasquez. I tried to bait Stuver into talking trash about Michael Boxall in the media availability and said like, is there any guys you have like on-field rivalries with that it's going to be difficult to be their teammate, or like you're going to have to like kind of flip a switch? And Vasquez gave the answer like, you know, we're all professionals, we're all on the same journey, so it'll be friendly when we're in there. But and I was like, okay, I didn't get the answer I was looking for, but probably should have expected that. But then when they walked off, like we've been around Stuver a bit, he knows who we are. And so they walked off and I said, Brad, the correct answer to my question was Michael Boxall. And he said, hey man, I don't have a problem with Boxall. And he's one of the guys that I was talking about earlier that like, as much as I hate him on the field, he's probably a good dude. And I would probably like him in real life. And I think that's the approach Stuver has it. But whenever we only see him on the field, it's hard to get over that one.
It's probably one of those guys you'd love he was on your team too, right? Like we talked about, Felipe was one of those guys, right? Like if it's like most hated player in the league, except for when he's on your team, everybody loves him. Boxall feels like very much that way.
Boxall's like that, but actually good at soccer.
that's a fair difference. Okay, we teased sort of some of the, in the buyout things where we talked about some of the salary stuff. So we got the salary dump from the league. I don't know if we learned a ton. What were your highlights?
I mean, I think one of the big news items is the salaries of our DPs, which we didn't have before. So maybe we had Bukhari's from last year. I think we did.
Yeah, that was the one.
So he's on 1.5 million this season. We got Uzuni and Vasquez. So Uzuni is on 2.25 million guaranteed. Vasquez is on 3.5 million guaranteed. I think the Vasquez one is a little higher than a lot of people expected, but still not like an egregious amount. And again, I want to preface this. I feel like I do this every time we talk about salaries. On one hand, very happy for these dudes getting their money. Like I'm always for players getting paid for, they're the ones providing the entertainment. They're the ones who make the sport. They deserve the money. Then on the other hand, I also understand that some of these guys getting paid more money means there's better players that they can't pay more money. That's not true of the DPs, right? Like none of that matters. It's capped at a certain amount. So it's not an egregious amount. I don't really care how much you're paying them. After that, so it's those three. The next highest paid player is still Julio Cascante and had an escalator built into his contract, which is often the case with these longer contracts. He's now making $853,000 guaranteed and is Austin's only TAM player. Love Julio Cascante. Would love to have him on a cheaper number. This is and continues to be, I think we already knew this, but it continues to be, and even more so now that it's been bumped up a little, the worst contract on the books. Don't you think?
I do think it is. I think the one point to his defense is like at least he's spending it on clothes and hats. It's like his money's going to good use. Maybe, somebody else might be getting paid a lot and spending it on dumb things, but like at least Julio's priorities are in the right place. But yeah, that has to be by far the worst contract.
Going down from there, we have Robert Taylor, $630,000. I think it's probably a little higher than we were hoping, but it's still not crazy. And I think it's important to remember that the budget is going up. The amount of GAM is going up every year. So a $600,000 contract 2 years ago is different than a $600,000 contract now, right? Like the proportion of the budget that it takes up is less. than it would have been a couple of years ago. So I think that's important to note here. But the guy's a veteran. He's shown that he can be a really good provider. He hasn't gotten a chance to do that here yet, but I think that's a fair number for him. And Miami had already bought down a chunk of his salary. And so I think he's only counting 100 some odd thousands, like less than 200,000 towards our budget this year. And then it'll bump up to that 630 number next season. After that, Ilie Sanchez, 600,000. We kind of speculated on this last week. And one of the listener questions was, okay, Ilie's on an option year. Do you pick that up? And we said, like, on his current form, probably no. Now that we know his salary, I'm guessing that's a resounding no at this point, right?
Yeah, that has to go from an absolute no. I mean, on one hand, the fact that he went from 1.27 million or whatever he made last year to 600,000 is good for Austin. But yeah, Austin is not getting 600,000 worth of production out of him, and he does seem to have hit the wall. So, I mean, honestly, that makes it like good on Roto for making that deal to pay him less and also be able to get out from under it after the end of the season, because that's one spot where Austin will be able to create some roster flexibility here in the offseason to do some of the things that we know they need to do.
Going down from there, Dessler's on 550. Savovich also on 550. I've seen some people saying that they're unhappy with that one. I think for a guy of his pedigree and bringing him to a new country, et cetera, that's probably the number you'd expect. I don't think he's quite lived up to that number so far, but I still do believe that he has the quality that if he beds in a little bit better, gets some more quality around him, that he could be a guy that ends up being kind of a bargain on. But that's TBD. We'll see if that actually comes to pass. I think probably our best deals, Danny Pereira's on 515, still not a bad number. Stuver's on 500, and then Svatak's on 500. I think that's up. I think he was only on 250 or something the year before, so he got an escalated pay raise there. Beer is still on 275K. That's a great deal. Really good find from Roto on that one.
Yeah, that one is for sure. It's one of the best deals that they have on the team. So we weren't surprised, I don't know, on the good or the bad, generally overall. But one note that you had talked about before we started recording was that not having a lot of transfer fees also helps with the total cap hit.
Right. So this is just their salary, but you have to remember that for a non-DP player, you still have to factor in a transfer fee into how much they count against your salary budget. A lot of these guys don't have that. There's, I think Svatak had a transfer fee. Savovich had a transfer fee, but a lot of these other guys don't have that. And so they're not taking up as much space as it would have been, even though some of the salaries are maybe not what you would call really high value salaries, because there's not a transfer fee attached to a lot of them. They're not taking up as much space as they could, which is good. So yeah, not a lot of really good surprises as far as guys that are on really low numbers that we didn't expect. Not a lot of bad surprises as far as guys who are on really high numbers we didn't expect. But I think one of the big takeaways is Julio Cascante is still our only TAM player and is using minimal TAM. It's not that much, probably. We don't know exactly how much they actually applied to him, but there's potentially a pretty big chunk of TAM that can be used this year on that one more player. Will they use it? Will it be a guy who makes a difference this year? Who knows? But it's there to be used if they find the right guy.
The story of the history of this team. There's like if the next guy comes in and the pieces fit together, everything will be different. And It hasn't, except for that 1 year.
All right. Should we move on to our LAFC preview, Jeremiah?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. This one, July 5th in Austin. Do y'all have July 4th plans, Jeremiah?
We will be blowing up. I'm sorry for people whose dogs are scared by this, but yeah, we'll have an unreasonable amount of fireworks going off in the cul-de-sac. But early. We got kids. It's like this would be like 8 o'clock or something, like as soon as it's dark, not in the middle of the night. So I'll claim credit for that. And then, July 5th will be Austin FC versus LAFC.
Yeah, we're gonna drive up to Fort Worth and do the 4th with family, but then we'll be back on Saturday for the game. So, yeah, LAFC's coming into this one off of the Club World Cup. They got 0 wins, 1 draw, 2 losses. I don't think they're coming out of this tournament with their heads held as high as Seattle, but probably not feeling terrible about their performance either. They lost 1-0 to Vancouver on their return to league play the other day, but I mean, everyone loses to Vancouver, so
Yeah.
what are you going to do about that?
Yeah, and then we also got this Olivier Giroud buyout news, which was not a dream, which was reality, but I did have to go back and look up. So I think they've mutually agreed to part ways. I think he had, 3 goals, 4 assists maybe total during his time in LA, so not a lot of loss there for them, probably a lot of flexibility added. Denis Bouanga, still there. I mean, he's only scored 8 goals so far, which obviously would be by far the leader in Austin, but for him, he seems to be having a little bit slower of a season. And then Austin did win at BMO on March 15th, 1-0 in a game that I don't think Austin had a lot of folks thinking that we believe that they would end up winning that match.
Yeah, Bouanga hasn't had the season that most people expected of him, but he's still extremely capable of just destroying you whenever he does have his night. And all it takes is one, right? Like, how many times have we gone into lots of games, but especially LAFC, where we've played a pretty good game, they get that one chance over the top, Bouanga comes in and kills you. Like, that's all it takes. And maybe he's not going to score 15 goals against you, but he doesn't need to. He can just score 1, and that can change the game for you.
And it feels like his skill set is like the type that Austin struggled with the most, just because of the lack of athleticism across the back line, where he's smart. If anybody goes to sleep for any amount of time, he's going to get behind him and he's going to put it in the back of the net. Like, he doesn't waste a lot of chances. So even, Denis Bouanga not at the top of his game is still super threatening.
Yeah, and the key here is going to be mostly in the midfield, right? So again, when we're playing defense as a team, we're pretty good. But it's against a team like LAFC, who has a player like Denis Bouanga. If you give up an inopportune ball in the midfield and they turn the other way and catch you out of position, he's going to kill you. If you miss 3 tackles by all 3 midfielders in the span of 3 seconds, he's going to kill you. And so those, again, it's those moments that, like, yeah, be solid, work as a team, but also don't do something stupid that then puts your teammates in a tough position.
Well, I think let's talk about what's ahead after LAFC and then talk about how that might affect this match. So remember the US Open Cup on Tuesday, as we teased, Austin plays the quarterfinal versus San Jose in San Jose. The winner of that one advances to play the winner of Minnesota United in Chicago. Then Austin has Saturday night at home versus the New England Revolution. So you're looking at a 3 games in 8 day situation. I don't think the Tuesday to Saturday gap is like that monumental, because that's the standard, amount of recovery. But I wonder, will the US Open Cup match on Tuesday have any effect on the way that Austin plays on Saturday and the way that Nico lines the club up?
Yeah, Saturday to Tuesday is tough, especially having to travel to California on one of those days that would be training/recovery. I think that is a tough one. So I'm curious. I'm sure there will be some kind of rotation. It'll be interesting to see how Nico approaches it. I would guess he'll put out the strongest team he can against LAFC at home, knowing that, okay, this is a team that is tough to beat, but we're at home. We need the points. We have to go for it on this one, and then go into Tuesday and just react based on, okay, what was the result? How many minutes did these guys go? Who do we think can go 60? And then again, Open Cup, it could potentially go to extra time and then to penalties. And so you're not looking at a guy potentially playing 90, you're looking at guys potentially playing 120. And so you have to factor all that in. But I think you put your best team out here at Q2 and then put out whatever after that, what's left of that, what's the best team you can put out on Tuesday. and then bring guys off the bench as needed from there. And hopefully you can stay in the game long enough to get whatever quality you need off the bench onto the field.
Well, I'm going to answer this for you. I would hope that means that we see you get your Taylor and Bukhari start on the wings on Saturday against LA. Are there any other like particular player moves that you want to see or expect to see that's different from what we've seen in recent matches?
Those are the main ones, really. I mean, maybe you see some changes in the midfield where, it feels like Ilie away in the Open Cup. That seems like a game where he would start maybe. And so, yeah, maybe still Sabovic and Pereira in the midfield. And then if one of them just has a lot of output on Saturday and don't think they can go the full 90 on Tuesday, you swap some guys out there. But it really is the wingers where I'm looking at, where those are positions who are probably going to have to do a lot of work, especially with Denny Bouanga, where last time we played them, we saw them kind of double teaming him up that side and asking the winger to do a lot of work on that side. There's going to be a lot of running there. So hopefully we can, see our best players on the field and see Taylor get a run out. And then you still have Uzuni to come off if he's healthy again, to spell him and then maybe start away or something like that. So there's some options here. I'm not sure exactly what pieces will come together, but we do have some options to kind of put two pretty good teams out in both of these games.
Well, I think down the road, one of the things we've talked about. So Austin, I think we know this is a team that's going to be in the mix of clubs battling for a playoff spot. And thanks to an article from Verde All Day, Phil West, a week or two ago, we know that Austin does have one of, if not the easiest schedule remaining, especially after the Seattle match is over from this past weekend. So like that's another reason to look forward for Austin. It's like Austin played a really tough schedule in the first part of the season, and it does get markedly easier going forward, starting with this New England Revolution match on next Saturday. So maybe there's some reason for hope there. Yeah,
we have the San Jose game in the Open Cup, and then New England Revolution, who have not been great. The Galaxy, who have still only won. Is it still just one game, or have they won more than that now?
I think.
Either way, it's not a lot of points. DC United, who has mostly been really, really bad. Houston, who has been a mixed bag, but lately have not been very good. Dallas, who have had a really rough start. And then Montreal, who's been probably the worst team in the whole league this season. So we've said this before, that these are games that Austin should win, and they haven't won them. But this is a stretch where Austin has a real opportunity to collect some points, move their way up the table, establish themselves in the playoff run. And I mean, I said this last time we had this stretch too. If they can't do it in this stretch, they don't deserve it. And we can't say anything else after that.
Yeah, I think there's no better way to put it.
We should also mention that this weird schedule next week is going to kind of mess with our schedule as well. I don't think we have any choice but to kind of stick to our normal schedule, which means next week's show is going to come out the same day as the Open Cup game. And then the next week's show, we're going to back to May mode, right? Where we're covering 2 games and previewing 2 games. And so it's going to be a little bit of a hectic one, but we'll do our best and try to still bring you some good content.
Yeah, and at least this one's for a good reason. Like Austin advanced the U.S. Open Cup past where it has been. That's cool. It's good. We should celebrate that, and hopefully we have a reason to celebrate it even more going forward. Because it's a neat tournament, and it's great that Austin's gotten this far, and it's great that there's some potential that we'll get another U.S. Open Cup match at home at some point down the road.
Yeah, for sure. All right, anything else, Jeremiah?
No, let's go ahead and close it out.
All right, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Come find us on the internet, wherever you are on the internet. Sign up for the Patreon. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week to review the LAFC match and preview the San Jose and New England matches, and then cover whatever other Austin FC news comes up. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Thank for nothings. You never.
La gente.
Oh my God.
Because they love cheap boom boom sauce.
Yeah.